Expansive History of European Opera Part 2 of 32. These 32 talks feature 177 operas and 116 composers over 4 centuries and from 12 countries. Baroque Opera Part 1. Vivaldi Teramo. Italian Opera. Italian opera had become a degraded spectacle. Many poets and intellectuals shared this view, and it was their attempts to ratio-negationalize the libretto that formed the basis of the reforms that produced opera seria, the dominant operatic genre for most of the 18th century. Opera seria has somewhat stilted arias peppered with recitative accompanied only by continuo, harpsichord and cello, breaking up the flow of music. The gifted poet reformer Pietro Tripozzi, better known as Metastasio, re-established the 5-act format, used plots from ancient history, limnegationated the characters to no more than 6, and banished the comic subplot and further refinements. Such was his influence that his name became synonymous with opera seria. More background later in this talk. Antonio Vivaldi. One Venetian who held his own in his native city, although briefly, was Antonio Vivaldi, who from 1713 devoted much of his energy to opera. Vivaldi was not as progressive a composer as Scarlatti, though he set a number of Metastasian texts, but his operas are full of wonderfully rich music. In 1703 Vivaldi became a priest, but he stopped celebrating Mass almost immediately on the grounds of ill health, though his condition never seems to have impeded his frequently arduous travels as a composer. When in 1720 he moved back to Venice, he discovered that fashion had shifted and that the operatic style which he practiced had come under satirical attack. From 1725 he had a close association with Anna Giro, a young soprano who often took the principal roles in operas staged at Sant'Angelo. Vivaldi's later works were unfashionable. In 1738 he was forbidden from entering Ferrara by the Archbishop because of his question-negation-able relationship with Anna Giro and, more importantly, because of his refusal to say Mass. Vivaldi's operas were now dated and even the Venetian public began to lose interest. It was for this reason that, in August 1740, he left Venice for Vienna, arriving in June the following year 1741. He died a pauper within a month of arriving, and, like Mozart, was buried in a communal grave, though in Vivaldi's case the location is known. His finest dramatic works come from 2 periods: the start of his career, Orlando Finta Pazzo, 1714, L'Incoronazione di Dario, 1717, and the late 1720s, possibly inspired by his collaboration with Anna Giro, Finoche, 1727, Orlando Furioso, 1727. Curiously, the quality of Vivaldi's operas deteriorated as he became more experienced, mainly because he was too impish, ironic and inventive to conform happily to the burgeoning fashion for austerely poetic works from the 1720s onwards. Nevertheless, his ensemble writing, including an exquisitely beautiful quintet in La Verità 1720, was pioneering, as was his delightful use of solo instruments within the orchestral texture, and there are many examples of the most vivid illustrative touches in his arias. One of Vivaldi's finest dramatic works, L'Incoronazione di Dario, 1717. The plot is relatively straightforward. The Persian emperor has died, leaving 2 daughters, Statira and Argine. Whomsoever Statira, the elder daughter, marries will be emperor. Dario, Oronte and Arpege jostle for position, but Statira loves Dario, so things seem all set. The comedy comes from 2 areas. Statira is so naive and trusting as so seems simple-minded, which allows her sister Argine to run rings round her and Dario. Argine loves Dario and wants him for himself. But Dario has a doggedness about his devotion to Statira which wins out in the end. Oronte and Arpege spend the evening jostling for Statira's hand with predictable results. Statira Nargene Stutenisno is a rather creepy character who wants Statira for himself. Oronte already has a beloved, Alinda, who spends the evening alternately railing at him and bewailing the fact that she still loves him. There is also a devoted female servant, Flora. First excerpt. Excerpt 1. Second excerpt. Excerpt 2. In compliance with the librettist Metastasio's theories, the nature of the aria was transformed. Metastasio's impact upon the subject and structure of the plot was equally marked. The success of Metastasio's 60 or so libretti was phenomenal. It has been estimated that almost 1,000 operas written in the 18th century were settings of his 60 or so libretti, although it was not long before the Metastasian formula itself was challenged by composers like Gluck. But the evolution of opera seria was not simply a question of changes to the libretto. Metastasio the librettist was responding to musical developments that had appeared in Italian opera towards the end of the 17th century. These were exemplified by the work of Alessandro Scarlatti, 1660–1725, the most successful composer working in Italy at the turn of the century. Scarlatti's many operas helped to consolidate a number of musical conventions that would become staple elements of opera seria. Unfortunately, Scarlatti's work has so resolutely resisted revival that even his two most highly regarded works, Mitridate Eupator and Tigrone, are unavailable on record. The clear-cut separation of the aria from recitative was linked with the spectacular rise in artistic status of individual singers. By 1700 many people went to the opera primarily to see star performers displaying their skills, often blatantly in competition with each other. The principal parts were written for high voices, the leading male role would be sung by a castrato. Battista Pergolesi. Pergolesi was dogged by ill health and lived for a mere 26 years. He strove, without conspicuous success, to achieve fame as a composer of opera seria, but was more popular for his comic works. One of these, La Serva Padrona, 1733, achieved such notoriety that his posthumous reputation became greatly inflated and music by others was regularly ascribed to him by unscrupulous publishers. In spite of public opinion, Pergolesi continued to apply himself to opera seria. The opera plot of La Serva Padrona. Uberto, an elderly bachelor, is angry and impatient with his maidservant, Serpina, because she has not brought him his chocolate today. Serpina has become so arrogant that she thinks she is the mistress of the household. In fact, when Uberto calls for his hat, wig and coat, Serpina forbids him from leaving the house, adding that from then on he will have to obey her orders. Uberto thereupon orders Vespone to find him a woman to marry so that he can rid himself of Serpina. Serpina convinces Vespone to trick Uberto into marrying her. Serpina informs Uberto that she is to marry a military man named Tempesta. She will be leaving his home and apologizes for her behavior. Vespone, disguised as Tempesta, arrives and, without saying a word, demands 4,000 crowns for a dowry to marry Serpina. Uberto refuses to pay such a sum. Tempesta threatens him to either pay the dowry or marry the girl himself. Uberto agrees to marry Serpina. Serpina and Vespone reveal their trick, but Uberto realizes that he has loved the girl all along. They will marry after all, and Serpina will now be the true mistress of the household. First excerpt. Excerpt 3. Second excerpt. Excerpt 4.
Contento il cuore, e amore avrò per te, e amore avrò per te.
Di pure la verità.
Questa è la verità.
Oddio, mi par che no.
Non dubitar.
Oddio, mi par che no.
Non dubitar, poi no.
Sposo grazioso,
mia sposetta,
grazioso,
diletta. Solfu, mi fai godere, mi fai godere. Solfu,
mi
fai godere, mi fai godere.
contento tu sarai,
Sarò,
sarai,
sarò,
avrai amor per me,
per te,
per me,
per te.
di pure la verità, di.
Questa, questa è la verità.
Oddio, oddio,
Non dubitar, non dubitar, non dubitar.
mi pare che no,
Oi buon, oi buon.
contento tu sarai,
Sarò
avrai amor per me,
per te,
e
sì,
avrai
avrò
per me,
per te.
sposo grazioso,
Sposetta mia diletta, diletta mia sposetta,
grazioso,
diletta,
sposetto,
sposetta. Solfu. Solfu, mi fai godere. Solfu, mi fai godere, mi fai godere, mi fai godere.
se come andar vorrò, disgusto non avrai, or serva più gonzo,
Disgusto non avrò, se comandar vorrai, con discrezio. Quanto sei cara, quando questa belle piace, e per me piace, piace, e per me piace.
sposo grazioso,
Sposetta mia diletta, diletta mia sposetta,
grazioso,
diletta,
sposetto,
sposetta. Solfu. Solfu, mi fai godere. Solfu, mi fai godere, mi fai godere, mi fai godere.
In France. As the 18th century began in France, the spectre of Lully, described in the previous talk, still hung like a fog over operatic life, stifling the kind of rapid development that was occurring in Italy. The Lullian tragédie lyrique was still the supreme form of music theatre, but an alternative did exist in the form of a lighter genre called the opera ballet, which consisted of 3 or 4 acts, combining singing and dancing, and loosely connected by a picturesque theme. It was largely the creation of the composer André Comparé. He enjoyed great success in 1710 with his opera ballet Les Fêtes Vénitiennes, the Venetian festivities, but he also wrote the outstanding tragedies lyriques of the period, including Idomenée, 1711. A progressive composer, Comparé endeavored to reconcile his native idiom with certain Italianate elements. André Comparé was the most important French opera composer between Lully and Rameau. Like many of his French Baroque contemporaries, he sought to reconcile aspects of the Italian style with that of the French, in his own words, to mix French délicatesse with Italian vivacité. Historically, Comparé's most significant contribution to French theatre was the creation of the opera ballet. This was a typically French combination of dance and song that replaced the serious and exemplary world of mythology and chivalry with a frivolous and hedonistic fantasy world, much like the Jetés Galantes of the painter Watteau. The first example of the new genre, L'Europe Galante, was staged in 1697, and its reception encouraged Compre to leave Notre Dame. His success as a theatre composer began to diminish from 1718. Here is the opera plot of one outstanding tragédie lyrique of the period, Idomenée. Prologue: Venus visits Aeol, Aeolus, in his cavern to ask him to release the wind so she can punish the Greek hero Idomenée, Idomeneus, on his way back from the siege of Troy to his home in Crete. Act 1, in Crete, Ileone, daughter of King Priam of Troy, reveals she has rejected the advances of Idomenée, but is secretly in love with his son Idomant. He returns her love, spurning Electra, who jealously plots revenge. News arrives that Idomenée has been lost in a storm at sea. Act 2, Idomenée has been shipwrecked, but, thanks to the god Neptune, he has survived. He reveals he owes his life to the promise he made to Neptune to sacrifice the first person he should meet on the Cretan shore. To his horror, that person is his own son Idomant. Act 3, Idomenée has learnt of the love between Ileone and Idomant and is torn between a desire to save his son and jealousy. He orders Idomant to take Electra back to her homeland, but as the ship is ready to depart, a huge sea monster blocks its way. Neptune is determined to keep Idomenée to his vow. Act 4, Ileone tells Idomant of Idomenée's love for her. At the temple of Neptune, Idomenée implores the god to release him from his promise. Idomant fights and kills the sea monster. Act 5, Idomenée announces that he will leave the throne and Ileone to Idomant. But the god's anger is not yet appeased. They send Idomenée insane, and in his fury he mistakenly kills his own son. Here is an excerpt. Excerpt 5.
Espoir des malheureux, plaisir de la vengeance, calmez les mots que j'ai souffert.
Jean-Philippe Rameau. The composer who more than any other revitalized the Lullian tradition was Jean-Philippe Rameau, whose first opera, Hippolyte et Taracie, 1733, astonished its audiences with the vividness and daring of its musical language. Some found it crude and offensive, others, including Compre, hailed it as the music of the future, and factional disputes duly broke out between his supporters, the Ramists, and his critics, the Lullists. Here is an excerpt from Hippolyte et Taracie by Rameau. Excerpt 6. In Voltaire's words, after Lully, all other musicians simply imitated him until Rameau came. Rameau's operas did not make a conspicuous break with tradition, their subjects remained myth-bound and involved displays of theatrical opulence, incorporation rating choruses and ballets. But aspects of his style caused great controversy, notably his predilection for complex counterpoint, his theatrical use of harnegation money, his lyrical vocal manner and, most important, his move towards a smoother manner of construction. The most lasting of his innovation tunes, however, was his cultivation of a highly expressive form of recitative, accompanied by a chromatic and colorful orchestral presence. The effect electrified French theaters and it remained his most lasting gift to Gluck. Remarkably, Rameau did not compose the first of his operas until 1733, when he was already 50 years old. His success had been a long time in coming, partly because he had spent the first 40 years of his life in the provinces, and partly because what repute and negation he had made was as a music theorist, an occupation generally thought incompatible with the business of composing. In spite of his academic background, his music does not sound especially cerebral. In fact, the very opposite is true. One of the wealthiest men in France, La Pouplinière, patron, became great friends with Rameau from 1731 until 1753. Rameau was the music director at Passy, and it was La Pouplinière who provided the money and contacts that launched Rameau's late flourishing operatic career. Strange though it might now seem, his operas stirred controversy at the outset. The concentrated drama of Hippolyte et Aricie unnerved the consonegationvative establishment, for whom Lully's well-mannered style was the benchmark, and it was not long before the Paris opera was riven by factionalism. In one corner stood the Ramists, champions of the vivid theatrics of Rameau, and in the other stood the Lullists, urging a return to order and decorum. The conflict raged, on and off, for 20 years, during which time Rameau became increasingly popular, so popular that he became a cornerstone of the establishment against which he had once rebelled. In fact, by 1752, when he became embroiled in the so-called quarrel of the buffoons, Rameau was being attacked as the establishment's foremost relegation representative. He continued working into his 70s, producing Les Boreades in his 80th year, but even before his death he was being disnegation-missed as a fossil. With Gluck's arrival in Paris, Rameau was more or less forgotten. Here is his successful Les and Galante, 1735. The opera plot is in various sections. Cupids, in the prologue, resolved to find out examples of love in exotic climates. The generous Turk section allows the generous Osman to set free his captive Emily, whom he loves, so that she may be reunited with her former lover Valer. The Incas of Peru section deals with the rivalry in love of the Inca Huáscar and the Spaniard Don Carlos, the latter victorious in his pursuit of Princess Funny, in spite of volcanic eruptions. The Flowers section offers a Persian love intrigue, revised after its first performance into a simple tale of suspicions proved false, as the Sultana Fatima finds that her husband Takmaz has no designs on Adelaide. The Savages section moves to North America, where a Spaniard and a Frenchman compete for the love of Zima, daughter of a chief, who, not unnaturally, prefers one of her own people. Here is the first of 3 excerpts from Les and Galante. First excerpt. Excerpt 7. Second excerpt. Excerpt 8. Third excerpt. Excerpt 9.
À chaque instant, il en eut d'autres. Il est moins donné par leurs actes que par les voix.